Welcome and thank you for joining us today for the New South Wales Small Business Innovation Research Program webinar. My name is Thomas and I'll be moderating today's webinar. I would like to begin by acknowledging that today we meet on many operational lands. We acknowledge the traditional custodians of the lands and we show our respect for elders, past, present, and future. Just some housekeeping before we start. Today's webinar is recorded and will be available on the New South Wales Sbir website in the coming days. So if you would like to ask questions during the webinar, please type it in the Q&A box at the right-hand side of your screen. Today's webinar, we will have two separate sessions for two challenges from the Ministry of Health. First, the PPE challenge and then the water purification challenge. We each will have their Q&A session right after the challenge presentation. We will be answering as many of your questions as we can during the Q&A sessions. If we do not have the time to get to all the questions live during the webinar, we will answer any remaining questions and include the responses in the transcript available on the website. Please note the closed captions are also available, so click on the CC box at the bottom right-hand corner of your screen. But first, I would now like to welcome Carlos Borget from R&D New South Wales, who will give you an overview of the Small Business Research and Innovation Program, followed by Hannah Tropping and Eva Smith to talk about the PPE challenge. Carlos, now I will hand over to you.
Thank you, Tom, and hi everyone, and thank you for joining us for today's webinar. My name is Carlos Borget. I'm a manager at the Office of the Chief Scientist and Engineer, and I'll be running you through the detail of the SBIR program before we discuss the specific SBIR challenges for today's webinar. At the end of today's session, there will be an opportunity to ask questions about the SBIR program and the SBIR challenge. The New South Wales Small Business Innovation and Research Program is an initiative of the New South Wales Government that provides competitive grants to small and medium-sized enterprises to find and commercialise innovative solutions to well-defined problems for New South Wales Government agencies. The 2021 SBIR program will provide up to $12 million in grants to New South Wales SMEs to solve 5 New South Wales Government challenges. The establishment of the SBIR program was recommended as a priority action of the Turning Ideas into Jobs Accelerating R&D in New South Wales Action Plan. The action plan was developed by the Accelerating R&D in New South Wales Advisory Council, a group of leaders with experience in research, the innovation ecosystem, and government policy. The New South Wales SBIR program is modelled on similar successful Australian and international examples, including the Commonwealth's Business Research and Innovation Initiative, the SBIR program in the United States, and the Small Business Research Initiative in the United Kingdom. The SBIR program is an important element of the New South Wales Government's approach to increase innovation and prosperity in New South Wales. Innovation generates the products and services crucial for future jobs and industries. R&D undertaken in businesses and research organisations is a major source of innovation and should be supported for the whole community and the economy to thrive. The SBIR program has 2 main objectives. Number 1, to increase innovation in government by leveraging the capacity of New South Wales SMEs and R&D to solve important problems for government. And number 2, to increase economic development by driving jobs and industry growth and supporting the development of innovative products and services in New South Wales. There are 5 SBIR challenges for 2021. The Connectivity Challenge, to increase the strength and resilience of communications networks in regional and remote areas. The Hyperlocal Navigation Challenge, to assist passengers with vision impairments to access public transport services. The Koala Count Challenge, to detect and quantify koala populations in New South Wales. The Personal Protective Equipment Challenge, to reduce waste associated with discarded PPE and sterile wrap. And the Water Purification Challenge, to reduce microplastic and other contamination in health facilities. In today's seminar, we're going to be discussing the last 2 challenges. The benefits of the SBIR program for participating SMEs include up to $1.1 million in grant funding to develop and commercialise a new technology or service, the opportunity to work with the New South Wales Government to pilot and test solutions, the potential to obtain a New South Wales Government contract for a successful solution that you've developed, and the ability to retain IP rights and the right to commercialise and sell your solution in domestic and global markets. Our measures of success for the SBIR program are that more SMEs will establish and grow their R&D activities and jobs in New South Wales, that New South Wales SMEs will be able to translate more ideas into innovative products and services, and that New South Wales government agencies will be able to deliver better services to the New South Wales community by using these solutions. The SBIR program has 3 phases. Phase 1 is the feasibility study, where SMEs submit a proposal to solve one of the 5 SBIR program challenges. The proposals are assessed, with each successful applicant receiving a grant of up to $100,000 to conduct a feasibility study over 3 months. Phase 2 is the proof of concept phase, where successful feasibility study grantees are invited to apply for the proof of concept grants. Applications are assessed, and each successful proof of concept grantee will receive up to $1 million to develop a proof of concept of their solution over a period of up to 15 months. And phase 3 is procurement, where New South Wales government agencies will consider purchasing successful solutions. As SBIR participants complete their feasibility studies and proof of concepts, the New South Wales Government Agency and the SBIR team will work closely with them to provide advice and input and help them develop their solutions. This occurs via both formal monthly check-ins and updates with all participants, and also informal interactions and assistance. Post-SBIR, participants are encouraged to take their solutions to other customers in other markets. The challenges have been specifically chosen, so they encourage solutions that not only the New South Wales Government would consider procuring, but also solutions that could be commercialised and sold to customers beyond the New South Wales Government. Applicants must meet the 5 eligibility criteria. For more information about these criteria and to view the eligibility criteria in full, please refer to the 2021 New South Wales SBIR program guidelines, which are available on the SBIR website. Applications for feasibility grants are now open, and they'll be evaluated against the following 3 overarching criteria. The first criterion is the technical criterion, which is worth 40 points, so there are 3 sub-criteria. A, to what extent would the proposed solution address the challenge statement, including the solution requirements? B, is the proposed solution ready to enter the feasibility study stage? And C, how is the proposed solution innovative and superior to what is currently on the market? The commercial criterion is worth 30 points, and there are 3 sub-criteria. A, does the proposed solution have commercial potential? B, given its commercial potential, does the proposed solution deserve public investment? And C, does the application provide a reasonable plan for the next steps towards commercialisation and adoption, including identifying potential barriers and how these will be mitigated? The delivery criterion is worth 30 points, and there are 3 sub-criteria. A, does the company and project team have the appropriate skills and experience to carry out the project? B, does the team have access to the equipment, technology, infrastructure, and financial resources needed to carry out the project? And C, does the application provide a reasonable project plan, including a budget, risk management plan, and performance measures? Each question in the application form states which assessment criterion it is being scored against. Try and respond as directly and succinctly to each question asked. There is a word limit for every question. We also ask applicants to submit some supporting materials along with their application, specifically a video presentation no longer than 3 minutes and a project budget. Applicants may also be required to provide profit and loss statements and balance sheets from the last 2 years. Eligible applications will be assessed by both a New South Wales Government agency that proposed the challenge and an independent panel of experts with experience in business development, commercialisation, venture capital, and entrepreneurship. Please read the 2021 SBIR program guidelines before you apply. The guidelines set out the SBIR program process and requirements in detail, including the eligibility and assessment criteria, how we assess applications, how we notify applicants and enter into grant agreements with grantees, how we monitor and evaluate performance, and the responsibilities and expectations in relation to this opportunity. You may also wish to consult the New South Wales SBIR FAQs available from our website. When you are ready to apply, you can download the application form from our website, and once complete, submit the form and supporting documents to the SBIR email address, which is sbir@chiefscientist.newsouthwales.gov.au. We have extended the application closing date by 2 weeks to account for the impacts of the New South Wales COVID restrictions on businesses. Applications now close on Sunday, the 29th of August, 2021. Thank you for your time today, and I'm now going to pass over to the Challenge Agency, who will talk through the first challenge for today's webinar. At the end of the presentation, we will answer some questions on the SBIR program in general and the challenges. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Carlos. So my name is Eva Smith, and I will be presenting the Personal Protective Equipment Challenge with Hannah Chopping, who is the Sustainability Program Lead across HealthShare New South Wales. To begin, I would like to acknowledge the traditional lands on which we meet today and pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging. Just the next slide, please. HealthShare New South Wales is a complex and diverse organisation, and I'd like to provide you with a bit of context to start. Next slide. HealthShare New South Wales supports New South Wales Health to deliver clinical care and help drive system-wide improvements. We're the largest government shared service organisation in Australia. We play an increasing role in caring directly for public hospital patients, providing them with clinically appropriate transport, nutritious hospital meals, and a clean and comfortable hospital experience. We support all New South Wales Health doctors, nurses, allied health and administrative teams by ensuring that they have the supplies and equipment they need to do their jobs and ensure that they get paid as well. We are intrinsically aware that our size and scale positions us to drive innovation, service improvement and sustainable practice for the sector, a responsibility that we take very seriously. This slide gives you a snapshot of what we do. Particularly relevant for this challenge is that every year in our business as usual, we manage 3 million different medical and surgical consumables. Throughout the COVID response, we have expanded our responsibilities with $1.4 billion worth of stock held in the whole of government warehouse, and that's currently being managed by HealthShare on behalf of the broader New South Wales Government. We're extremely proud of the sustainability initiatives that we have implemented over the last 10 years. And by including sustainability in one of our 3 pillars in our 2020-2024 strategic plan, we're committed to continue to grow in this space. We partner with suppliers and stakeholders across the state and around the globe to work towards economically and environmentally sustainable practices to support the whole of New South Wales Health. We deliver these services to achieve the outcomes for patients that the patients need and ensure that all staff, patients and the New South Wales community get the best use of the resources available to them. Our sustainability priorities represent our commitment to being an adaptable and resilient organisation that supports the health system to deliver better value care, reduce its environmental footprint and deliver services in times of need. I'm going to pass on to Hannah, who's going to take you through the details of the challenge.
Thanks, Eva. So let's dive in and talk about our PPE challenge. Our employees, patients, and the communities in which we operate expect us to be environmentally sustainable, and we hold ourselves to this account. PPE and sterilisation wrap are essential to maintaining the safety of clinicians, hospital staff, and patients. The sustainable management of PPE is a key challenge that New South Wales Health face, as its disposal creates significant waste streams, and a suitable solution has the ability to significantly reduce the environmental footprint of New South Wales Health. This is a 3-prong issue, with consideration required for unused PPE and sterilisation wrap, which requires disposal after its use-by date, used PPE and sterilisation wrap, which have associated infection control issues, and stability in the ongoing supply of PPE and sterilisation wraps. HealthShare have played an integral role in ensuring that our hospitals and facilities have the PPE and equipment that they need to continue to support the broader New South Wales health effort. To support the system and other government agencies in response to the COVID-19 pandemic, the Whole of Government Procurement Group was established to source and secure personal protective equipment items which are stored in the Whole of Government warehouse and managed by HealthShare on behalf of the state government. The PPE stock includes gloves, eyewear, gowns, hand sanitizer, hand wash, masks and cleaning products, and is required for multiple government agencies as the COVID-19 pandemic continues. Forecast requirements for PPE were driven by the New South Wales Ministry of Health's plan for the immediate and longer term needs within the public health sector, along with each agency's individual requirements. The increased use of PPE in response to the pandemic poses a short to medium term problem. We're in a strong position within our stockpile of PPE, and while we continue to assess and meet the health system and our partner agencies' needs, there's now a focus on consumption of the whole of government stockpile prior to expiry through multiple avenues. A proportion of these products, however, may reach their use-by date prior to being consumed and will require disposal. The ongoing disposal of used PPE and sterilisation wrap in our business as usual operations is a longer-term problem. Small volumes of reusable PPE and sterilisation wrap are used in some local health districts. However, largely there's a reliance on single-use products which are disposed of in both clinical and general waste streams in accordance to infection control measures. Adding to the complexity of the problem, recently New South Wales Health have also had to combat a surety of supply risk due to the increased usage in response to the pandemic, which led to a global shortage of the PPE and sterilisation wrap raw material, polypropylene. New South Wales Health have effectively managed these risks, but would like to explore options to mitigate our exposure to these risks in the future. There are a number of considerations that must be taken into account with any solution design. As I touched on earlier, solutions for the disposal of PPE must comply with infection control and healthcare operating requirements, and these requirements are outlined on the Clinical Excellence Commission website. Solutions must also be cost-effective and withstand a value for money assessment. They must comply with the relevant New South Wales Health contracts, policies, including the Whole of Government Waste Contract and the New South Wales Health Procurement Policy. They must be robust, practical and functional for use in a healthcare setting. They must be scalable for implementation at local health district site level, as well as be suitable for larger stockpile locations. And they must also consider the whole of life for PPE and sterilisation wrap, including the reliability of raw material supply, meeting the New South Wales Health procurement and supply chain requirements, have appropriate storage requirements and shelf life, be suitable for use in an operational healthcare setting, and have a product stewardship approach to waste management. The goal of this challenge is to minimise waste associated with discarded PPE and sterilisation wrap and ensure the ongoing supply of PPE and sterilisation wrap remains stable. This may also be achieved by reducing our contribution to landfill, reducing our reliance on single-use products where feasible, and ensuring any solutions have a stability in their ongoing supply. We appreciate that this is a complex issue and may require multiple technologies for achievement, and this could also include technologies for reprocessing, segregating, and reducing waste. This list of technologies, however, is not all encompassing, and we encourage applicants with innovative technologies that have not been listed here to apply. Our success will have three key impact areas, namely economic, environmental, and social. Our economic success would be generated from reduced waste management costs. However, in balance, New South Wales Health are bound by budget constraints, and any solution must be assessed for value for money against other products in the market. Our environmental success would be measured by reducing New South Wales Health's contribution to landfill and our environmental footprint. This benefit must be carefully balanced with all of our operational requirements in a healthcare setting. Our social success would be measured through our contribution to local and national waste commitments. Taking a stewardship approach to this to solution design would need to be considered, as our solution should not negatively impact the communities in which we operate. There's some additional considerations for our solutions. So there are some specific contracts, policies and regulations that must be considered into the design approach. And the solution must also be scalable to incorporate individual sites within the local health districts, as well as our stockpile locations. This needs to take into account the significant geographical and logistical considerations for a statewide service model. These contracts, policies and regulations are available on external websites, and we can provide the links on applicant request. I'll hand us back over to Tom to take us through any questions.
Well, thanks very much to Hannah and Eva for running through that brilliant presentation, and also to Carlos for sharing the details on the SBIR program. We are now also joined by other representatives from health on hand to answer your questions. So if you have a question, please type it in the Q&A box on the right hand of your screen. So I think we will probably dive into it because we saw quite a few questions that's been coming in. So the first one is from Martin. He's asking for more context around the resources separation systems to generate the uncontaminated material stream that can be reprocessed. So especially around the uncontaminated. This is a question for the health.
I'm just reading through the question as we're going, so thank you. So I guess this is not something that we currently have. So this is, I guess, it was listed in the challenge as an idea. So resource separation systems, meaning that we have some infection control waste streams as well as general waste streams. So resource separation systems to generate uncontaminated material stream that can be reprocessed. That would mean so the waste streams that are associated that have the infection control measures. So how can we reprocess that into something that no longer has those infection control measures? Eva, do you want to add to that from a CTS perspective?
No, that covers it. Thank you, Han.
Great, thanks, Hannah. We got a next question around the program, so I'll do it to you, Carlos. So people is asking, what about startup companies? Because for those type of company, there is no profit loss calculation available. How can they apply for the program?
Sure, thanks, Tom. So if you don't have profit and loss statements or balance sheets from the last 2 years, you should provide evidence of sufficient financial resources to undertake the project and commercialise the solution. And you should do this in response to question D2B in the application form.
Thanks, Carlos. I got another question about the program. So would a joint venture between a New South Wales company and another interstate company be eligible for the program? Carlos? Sure.
So the lead applicant needs to satisfy the 5 eligibility criteria and the guidelines. So if you are a New South Wales SME, you may partner with organisations outside New South Wales, for example, a business or university in another state or overseas. However, if you're successful, you'll need to conduct the SBIR program related research and development work in New South Wales. And so in practice, this means that you would need to self-fund a portion of the work undertaken outside New South Wales. So for example, if 25% of project work will be undertaken by a partner outside New South Wales, then the applicant should provide match funding of at least 25% of the total project cost.
Great, thanks, Carlos. I think that kind of answered the next question, asking about an interstate company that is committing to establish a strong presence in New South Wales, about that eligibility as well. So we'll move on to the next one. So there's a question asking, like, university or company charge for indirect costs, for example, like infrastructure cost? Could you answer that one, Carlos?
Sure. So in the SBIR program guidelines, on the final pages of the document, it identifies the specific costs that you're able to charge for there.
Great, thanks. I got another question. So it's asking about, is there like a sample solutions or ideas that are currently being considered by House on the PPE challenge?
So at the moment, there are some ideas that have been generated that we've provided on the slide. At the moment, they are all sort of working ideas, and there's not many further than that. But obviously, this is going to be part of us exploring those ideas further.
Great, thanks, Eva. I got another question asking about like what's the expiration date for your current PPE contract?
So I wonder whether we can get a bit more detail on that particular question around what's meant by PPE contracts. I don't know that I fully understand the question, so I can answer it properly if that's okay.
So I might just take on notice and move on to the next one. So there's a question around, are there any particular hospital sites or locations that can be accessed or should be considered for this challenge? Or could you answer that one, Eva or Hannah?
So this is a statewide challenge. So if there is access that's required to any particular hospital or site in particular, we will obviously partner with that site. However, this is an overarching statewide challenge.
Great, thanks. I got another eligibility question about the program. So in relation to funding for work outside New South Wales, if the project team is conducting feasibility work, for example, like market research or some pilot testing extra outside the New South Wales, would that be covered under the program, as you mentioned the costs? Carlos, you might answer that question.
Yeah, thanks, Tom. So the SBIR related work needs to be undertaken inside New South Wales. So the examples given there, market research and pilot testing, are part of the R&D process and part of the SBIR process. So they need to be undertaken inside New South Wales if they're to receive funding through the program. But like I mentioned before, you are able to have partners from outside New South Wales, but in accordance with those requirements around match funding and SBIR related funding not being used for that work undertaken outside.
Great, thanks. I think just answer the next one, so we'll move on. So there's a question asking around like, can we have some like some kind of technology or suite of technology services that is alternative to the reusable equipment for PPE that aims to reduce the use of disposable PPE?
Yeah, sure. So happy to provide a particular example because we know and have some stock of this already in New South Wales. So there's alternative reusable products for P2N95 respirator masks, which are already available and in use. As Hannah mentioned throughout the slides, however, they do come with their own infection prevention and control risks that obviously need to be mitigated, but that's just one example of something that's already available in the reusable space.
Great, thanks. Question from Joshua: what kind of technology readiness level would be required to be successful for the feasibility study stage? I will throw it to you, Carlos.
Thanks, Tom. So the overall aim of the SBAR program as a whole is to move solutions from TRL 3 to TRL 6 or 7. So really, if you're applying for a feasibility study grant, you should be at the TRL 3, potentially TRL 2 stage. Yeah, thank you.
Cool. There's another question. I think this is a follow-on question about the cost recovery about the infrastructure cost. So is there a cap or maximum percentage for infrastructure cost charged by university or company?
So I'm just going to refer to the guidelines again, because there is a lot of detail in the guidelines around the different categories of eligible expenditure. So it does need to be a direct cost or incurred to undertake the relevant project activities. And there's a lot of detail in those guidelines around what those things are. But if you look at those and you still have questions, so generally infrastructure probably wouldn't be covered looking at those, but it will be a case-by-case basis. So if you have a bit more detail, you're welcome to send us an email. We can address that.
Thanks, Carlos. There's a question about collaboration opportunities. So Bella is asking, is it possible to collaborate and share potential solutions with other applicants, or the program is purely competitive process? Carlos.
So it's a competitive process. You know, you're expected to submit your own application along with your partners who've agreed to support you. Obviously, you know, each applicant runs their own business and is welcome to make their own commercial decisions about, you know, who they work with and who they don't as the process goes on. But from our side, we'll be running it as a competitive process and looking to evaluate each proposed solution independently.
Great, thanks, Carlos. Question from Martin is asking, like, because there are many different waste streams today in a typical hospital, like infection control waste and general waste. Those are kind of mentioned, but is there others that need to be isolated and not mixed with those streams? Eva and Dahan, this is a question.
So it varies from site to site, but typically there is general waste, recycling and clinical waste, as well as cytotoxic waste. But again, it does vary from site to site, so some will have additional waste streams to consider.
Cool, thanks. Carlos, I think there's some other eligibility questions. So if a company has R&D company based in New South Wales, but the manufacturing arm is in another state, would that be considered as eligible for the program?
Thanks, Tom. So one of the criteria is that the eligibility criteria is that the SME needs to either be headquartered in New South Wales or conduct the majority of business R&D and production operations in New South Wales. So when we look at that, we take an assessment of the overall business, not the specific parts of the business per se. So, for example, if more than 50% of your staff are in New South Wales, then we'd consider that to be a New South Wales business. But as part of your application, please provide a bit more detail around that so we can make that assessment. And of course, you're welcome to send us an email as well, providing some of the particulars around your situation.
Thanks, Carlos. I think there's another question asking about the quantity of waste from PPE. So how much material we're talking about, asking about tons per year.
We might have to take this one on notice, Tom, and can provide sort of in the BAU environment what the waste is like. However, I don't have that information at the moment.
Cool, thanks. And also, We will provide the transcript of this webinar, and also any unanswered Q&A questions we will be included in that. Will be updated on the website in a couple of days. I got another few questions coming in, so we'll look at the next one. So will you look at how proposed solution could work together? I think this is kind of like a collaboration questions. So be more specific. That is, if one company delivers a solution that would work very well with another company's submissions, would you look at combining this kind of a solution into one kind of solution to the big challenge? Carlos, I think you kind of already answered these questions.
I can provide a bit more information around that. So the process is set up that there isn't a particular cutoff in terms of the number of feasibility studies that will proceed, or the number of proof of concepts, or the number of solutions that might be procured. So it is theoretically possible that 2 proof of concepts might get funded, and the agency might be interested in procuring both of those, and potentially they could complement each other. So there's no rule against that happening. But what I would say, I guess, is that you need to make sure that your solution that you're proposing comprehensively addresses the problem. So if it doesn't address it without another solution coming alongside it, then it wouldn't be successful throughout the process. But in terms of ultimate procurement and progression of more than one solution through the process, that's perfectly acceptable. And if the agency feels that combining them would work better, then they're welcome to do that. But you need to make sure that your proposal does comprehensively address the problem in and of itself.
Great. I think if we don't have any more questions for the PPE challenge, we might get into the presentation for the next challenge, which is around water purification. So thanks so much, Carlos and Eva and Hannah, for answering all those questions. We will now have the challenge presentation from Kevin Prasad, James Erskine, and also Eva Smith to talk about the water purification challenge.
Thanks again, Tom. So welcome to the Water Purification Challenge. So I will be co-presenting this with Kevin Prasad, who's the Associate Director in Linen Services for HealthShare New South Wales, and James Erickson, who's the Senior Project Officer at the Department of Planning, Industry and Environment. So we have just gone through a bit of context setting. However, I might just skip this slide and the next and tell you what is relevant around this snapshot of what it is that we do. So every year we have 51.2 million clean. Let me try that again. Every year we have 51.2 million clean bed sheets processed by HealthShare linen facilities, and that equates to about 40,000 tonnes of linen, using approximately 300 megalitres of water per year. So as mentioned previously, we do have the Be Sustainable pillar as part of our HealthShare overarching strategy 2020 to 2024. And with this, I will hand over to Kevin, who will go into the details of this challenge.
Thank you, Eva. So at HealthShare Linen Services, we're proud of the gains that we have made in water recycling and water consumption, but we want to achieve more. We have reduced our overall utility consumptions, that's water, gas and electricity, and we have made significant improvements. But as I said, we still want to achieve more. This is good for HealthShare itself. This is good for our staff because they're very proud to work for a business which takes its environmental responsibilities seriously. And it's good for the communities in which we work and we live in. Next slide, please. Our employees, patients, and the communities in which we operate expect us to be environmentally sustainable, and we do hold ourselves to this account. The 40,000 tonnes of linen we process each year produces large volumes of wastewater. This wastewater contains microplastics. We would like to identify and quantify the microplastics in the linen services wastewater with a view to improve water efficiency and increase our water recycling rates, as many of our linen sites actually operate in water-stressed regional communities. HealthShare would like to, in partnership, take on a stewardship role to develop solutions that not only work within our plants, but have a practical application for the commercial laundry industry in a whole, and also other industries that have high water consumptions and high water volumes of wastewater. We aim to improve the laundry industry's environmental outcomes. The goal of this challenge is to determine a baseline measurement and the ongoing measurement requirements to successfully measure, manage, and reduce microplastics in wastewater. By improving the quality of the wastewater, we also hope to position each facility to increase the uptake of water recycling. Our success will have three key impact areas, namely economic, environmental, and social. Our economic success would be generated from the increased uptake of water recycling to create value from wastewater, however, in balance. New South Wales Health are bound by budget constraints, and any solution must be assessed for value for money against other products in the market. Our environmental success would be measured by our reduction in microplastics in wastewater. This benefit must be carefully balanced with our operational requirements. And our social success would be measured by our increased uptake of water recycling, especially within our water-stressed communities, taking a stewardship approach to ensure the solution does not negatively impact the communities in which we work and we operate in. Our project stakeholders, Sydney Water is the largest water utility in Australia and treat wastewater from more than 5 million people across Sydney, Blue Mountains and the Illawarra areas. To help protect the health of our rivers and beaches, Sydney Water is also a New South Wales Government-owned statutory corporation. Sydney Water currently contributes to research on microplastic method development and microplastic characterisation in wastewater. Sydney Water are currently part of a collaborative research project to understand the impacts of microplastics. New South Wales Circular is a government-funded body with environmental, economic and social goals, created by the Office of the New South Wales Chief Scientist and Engineer and hosted by the University of New South Wales, Sydney. A circular economy aims to redefine growth, focusing on positive society-wide benefits, including designing out waste and pollution. The New South Wales Circular is a strategic partner on projects finding pathways to help reduce plastic waste from the health system, including microplastics. The New South Wales Department of Planning, Industry and Environment is a lead environmental agency for the New South Wales Government and the most qualified choice to lead our scoping of the assessment and requests. James is from the Sustainable Government team, which HealthShare has partnered with on many projects since 2014. And lastly, an industry advisor, the industry body Laundry Association of Australia, who represents many commercial laundries across Australia itself. So now I'd like to hand over to James.
Thanks very much, Kevin. Picking up a bit of an echo. Okay, I think it's gone then. So thanks, Kevin. My team in the Department of Planning, Industry and Environment, we're very excited to be part of this initiative in a technical advisory capacity from my team, the Sustainable Government team. I'm just going to present a couple of slides here. The first one is just a quick overview of microplastics. acknowledging that this is an emerging field and there's not currently good consensus on a lot of these aspects regarding microplastics. Essentially, microplastics can enter water bodies and the water system through different pathways, so from the atmosphere, from land, and from wastewater. So as Kevin mentioned, laundry facilities like the ones that are operated by HealthShare produce large volumes of wastewater, and it's likely that microplastics in that wastewater could potentially be reaching the environment. Microplastics themselves come in a variety of shapes and sizes and colors, different chemical compositions. They could be fibers, little fragments, or pellets. It really reflects the huge array of plastics that we currently use in products and chemicals in society today. But they can be generally classified in two broad groups. Primary microplastics are plastics that began out being small, so microplastics is typically below 5 millimeters. So these are things that have been designed for a specific use and are already small when they're in those products. Whereas secondary microplastics are the result of larger pieces of plastic breaking down as they go through the environment or various treatment processes. There is currently a lack of a standardized and widely accepted method to quantify and sample and analyze microplastics. So as you see on the right there could be things like visual inspection, microscopy, things like spectroscopy and spectrometry to analyze the chemical composition. But that is a challenge in itself, in that there is no accepted standard way to get good data on microplastics. Next slide, please. So our role in this project, we're going to be helping with the first step in this water purification challenge, which is called the scoping assessment. Now, the aim of this is to really set a really good baseline and data for respondents to the challenge, noting that a lot of the things in this scoping assessment would likely be questions and things that different respondents would be looking to do themselves. So the idea is to consolidate that, get this study done and provide the results to everyone so everyone is on the same page. The two broad categories of this scoping assessment are going to be number one there, which is the scientific analysis of wastewater itself from HealthShare's laundries. So that's just going to provide a scientific data baseline and information on the wastewater, on microplastics, and some other common contaminants and common wastewater analytical techniques that are done in the industry. The second part is a business analysis. So that's looking at the business profile of HealthShare's linen and laundry services, looking at things like the supply chain. What are the key needs of the business? What are some of the challenges? And looking at that through the lens and the eyes of those stakeholders in the business, what do these potential solutions have to do, and what challenges could they encounter at various points in the business? So the timing of this assessment, it's going to start in early August and should be completed by late October, prior to the feasibility studies themselves commencing. And the outputs will of course be supplied to all, equally to all feasibility studies. And it will be conducted independently, so the challenge applicants will not be eligible to conduct the scoping assessment. So with that, I'll hand back over for any questions.
Great, thanks so much, James, Kevin, and for the presentation. So if you have any question, please type in the Q&A box and we will try to answer as many as we can. So let's get into it. I think there is one question posted from last challenge, but it's about the program. So how important is about IP and R&D generated from the project as opposed to building on existing or proven technology? Carlos, do you want to take that question?
Sure, thanks, Tom. So look, the focus of the SBIR program is on business growth and commercialization of new technology. So it's okay to build on existing products and technologies through new innovations, but your proposed solution does need to be novel. So it can't already be commercially available in Australia or overseas. It can't be something where someone else already has the IP to do this.
Cool. Another question about the program. So is there any concern if the technology for wastewater treatment is developed at a research institute or a university, but it will be tested and commercialized by a joint team with a small company, SME in New South Wales, and the university? Carlos?
Yeah, so there's no issues with that. I mean, that's one of the objectives of this program, is to translate university or business R&D to industry who can commercialise it in New South Wales.
Cool. And next question is about the challenge. So for hospital wastewater, the concern is microplastics removal, but also mention about blood and substance. If there is no access to hospital wastewater, can the applicant consider domestic wastewater? Also, is it possible to consider other pollutants in the hospital wastewater streams, like isotopes and also pharmaceutical compounds? I think that's a question for Health and Ppe.
Kevin, is this something that you could speak to around the hospital wastewater at all?
So most of our plants actually don't sit on hospital sites. So access to our wastewater is quite easy to get to. And our sites are, even that we do have sites, 2 sites within a hospital campus, they are still very much segregated.
So let's move on to the next one. So are you looking for an online measurement of microplastic in wastewater that can be integrated to wastewater treatment process or even a lab solution? Kevin? Or...
Yeah, sorry, I was just reading the question, my apologies. We are looking at an online measurement of microplastic in our wastewater, so from what we are producing inside of our sites, first and foremost, but obviously that would have to be processed through a laboratory to actually qualify what the issue is. But at the moment, we're looking for a baseline.
Great, thanks, Kevin. And also there's another question about the scoping study. So will the scoping study provide a breakdown of the flows generated by health share laundry sites? Tell us how the 300 millimeter per year wastewater is kind of distributed across the sites from health share.
So yeah, we could provide a breakdown. We have 7 sites across New South Wales, and we can certainly give a breakdown to how much water is generated from each of our sites. They all vary in size, but we could certainly provide that information.
Great, thanks, Kevin. Next one from Long. So do all learning services in New South Wales have a trade wastewater agreement with Sydney Water? Does that mean like Sydney Water will treat the wastewater, and how many New South Wales learning service sites have on-site water recycling facilities?
So we only have 2 sites within the Sydney Water catchment area, which is processed through Sydney Water. Otherwise, we go to the local council areas. It depends on the location. And we do have water recycling. We do have water recycling in all of our sites. And we also do water cleanliness. So we treat the water before it goes down into the wastewater as well to ensure that we don't have too many BODs, that the alkalinity and acidity is balanced, and that we don't put down a too high temperature. They are fairly basic, but we do recycle currently. Like I said, very proud of what we've achieved, but I certainly would like to see how we can take that further.
Great, thanks, Kevin. There's another question about the microplastic concentration. So I'm not sure the question is about like a general quantity or for specific site, but the question is what are the estimated microfiber concentrations in the wastewater? Kevin or James, can you answer that question?
I don't know if it's related to the laundries themselves. I'm not sure do you have that information, Kevin, or not?
No, we don't. We don't have that information on how much is the concentrations of the plastics in our current wastewater.
Can I jump in there? So that will be the key function of the scoping study, as mentioned in the presentation, to provide that information to applicants prior to them completing their or commencing their feasibility studies.
Cool, thanks all. Let's move on to the next one. So it's quite technical questions. So it's asking about the range of, there's a range of definitions for microplastics, but do you have a guideline of size, for example, 0.5 millimeter to 100 millimeter, and what's the acceptable limits, and what's your removal limits? Do you want like 99% removal or 70% removal?
I think what Carlos said earlier, that's really one of the key findings we'd like to get from this project. You know, we need to set a baseline.
Yeah, I think as well what Carlos said, the scoping assessment would ideally give some indication of the current understanding and maybe even trends in other jurisdictions, for example. But that's, yeah, those types of things are not well defined at this point.
Cool, thanks. This next question, so it's asking like, would it be considering biological active agents in the wastewater?
Well, all of our product that comes from hospitals, we do consider it contaminated because we don't know who it's touched. So I would have to say, you know, there could be biological active agents in the waste.
Thanks, Kevin. Another question from Lom. So it's asking, can the applicant get in touch with online service to understand their specific requirements? I think this question for you, Kevin.
I'm going to hand this one over to you, Eva, because I think it needs to be a managed process. Yeah, I was just thinking whether that can be managed through Carlos and the Office of the Chief Scientist team, because obviously any extra questions we want to make sure that we answer them and everyone can have access to the same answers, so they have the same opportunities and hear the same information. So Carlos, do you have preference on how to manage that?
Yeah, so if you have specific questions for HealthShare or DPIE regarding this process, you can put them through the webinar right now and encourage you to do that. And if we don't get them today, we can answer them in the transcript. The other thing is that throughout the feasibility study process, there will be an opportunity to work more closely with the agency to get a much more detailed picture of exactly how your solution might integrate with their process. But that's not something that we do prior to applications closing. So the application process is really focused on, I guess, on what you can offer. And then that integration process is determined through the feasibility study process.
Great, thanks, Carlos, for answering that one. So, well, the next one, so is asking, do your linen service sites also service other clothing products? That's a question for the challenge agency.
So no, we are purely a hospital product linen service. So anything that goes into a hospital, bed sheets, towels, pillowcases, patient gowns. We also do a small amount of theatre linen.
Thanks, Kevin. Next one. So is HealthShare able to provide some information about the existing wastewater treatment process, which are already on your site, and to provide some context for what is already being done and what kind of solution that might work?
Yes, we could we certainly can provide that additional information.
Yeah, that would also be covered in the scoping assessment. Is under that business analysis piece, is mapping out some of those systems and what's already in place.
Thanks. Thanks, Kevin, James, and let's look at the next one. So the question is, can the innovation be only around the removal of plastics rather than the quantification of microplastics? I think this is touched on the scoping study. So can you answer that one, Kevin or James?
So can innovation be around the removal rather than the quantification? I think we need to have both, because we really need to have a baseline of what the issue is and how do we resolve that. Most definitely the removal. We want to make sure that we do not provide contaminated wastewater, the microplastic contamination in the wastewater, and that actually has consequences further downstream. So, but we certainly do need a baseline.
Great, thanks, Kevin. Next,
Tom, can I jump in on that one as well? So I just because that question, I was reading it now and I thought it might be around, like, does the novelty of the solution only need to apply to the quantification part, or does it need to also apply to the removal part as well? And I guess I would say your solution as a whole needs to be novel, so it can, have an existing, say, quantification process if that's robust, combined with a novel removal process, for example. So we look at it holistically, I guess, your proposal, in determining whether it's sufficiently novel and innovative.
Great, thanks. Let's look at the next one then. This one is about the scoping study. So will the scoping study including existing water treatment facilities at each health share site, and will they also provide a full water analysis, not just on the microplastic? James.
Yeah, that's the intention, is to provide a range of samples. So at various points along the system, if that would include any on-site water treatment, upstream and downstream. And yes, given that samples will be taken, it does make sense to do other analysis, common wastewater analysis beyond just microplastics, so that the scope of any of the feasibility studies is not limited by that availability of data.
Thanks. Next question. So because the recycling is a quite important objective, so could applicants receive data on the representative effluent quality from the current laundry facilities, and also the target of quality parameters for reuse?
I would say again that's exactly right. I think that would be the aim of the scoping studies, to not only look at the actual data from the analytical point of view of the effluents, but also get a sense from HealthShare in terms of any targets and what the solutions would be wanting to achieve. Would you agree with that, Kevin?
Agreed. Yes.
Great, thanks. Next question. Recycling is also on recycling. So are recycling applications limited to the use for washing, or other type of reuse applications like irrigation and also general wash downs? That's a question for the challenge agency.
In this instance, it's really about the washing, because that's where the bulk of our wastewater comes from. Yes, there is a little bit of domestic use there as well, but the bulk of it is from our processing plants.
Great, thanks, Kevin. I think you have touched on this question before, but see if you have further information. So, question is, for the project, is a focus more on the measurement of microplastics or their removal?
Yeah, well, like I said, I think we need to have a baseline so we know what success looks like. but most definitely on removal. We would like to capture it and make sure that we remove it before any effluent goes down the wastewater.
Thanks, Kevin. I got another one. So it's will the current COVID restrictions on the lab access and analysis impact, and how would the program consider this? Carlos, do you want to grab that question?
Sure. So as the feasibility studies don't commence till the end of October, I guess it's going to be hard to determine what the situation is then, but at the moment we'll just proceed as normal. And you know, as we move into October, I guess we'll see what the situation looks like then. Hopefully it will be much better. I think we all hope that.
Thanks. Just cautious about time. We actually 5 minutes past, so we might need to wrap up the Q&A session now. Thank you everyone for attending. So if you would like to find more information on the SBIR program, to download the application form and the challenge statements, those documents are all on the New South Wales SBIR program website. A recording of this webinar will also be available on our website with a transcript of the questions and answers in the coming days. So if you need to ask any further questions, our contact email address is sbir.chiefscientist.newsouthwales.gov.au, which is on the screen. So thank you everyone, and wishing you all the best.